And so that's why we're excited today to talk about a new tool that we actually just released to landowners in the Southeast earlier this week called Forest Forecast, which for your property will show you how different types of natural capital on your property can evolve depending on what your goals and management plan for that property look like, whether that's the cash flow from timber revenue or making really great deer habitat. And so Zach will pull up a live demo here and walk us through how you can use this on your property to evaluate questions like, should I sell my carbon or should I do a timber harvest? So I'll stop sharing, and Zach, over to you.
Perfect. All right, let's see if we can do this here. All right, am I coming through?
Yep, gotcha.
Good deal. Okay, so like Max said, when we were working with landowners, I mean, tens of thousands of landowners to evaluate carbon projects, one of the biggest challenges for them was to understand what they might be giving up, what they were actually selling when they worked with a forest carbon program. And the right way to think about it is that you're selling your harvest rights for a pretty long period of time, usually something like 20 or 40 years. And as Max said, many landowners, you're looking for sometimes revenue, sometimes you're looking to improve wildlife habitat, and a harvest decision isn't necessarily just binary. It's not just cut or let your forest grow. There's also there's different intensities of cutting your forest that can improve long-term value, that can provide more or less upfront revenue, and that can affect wildlife habitat, such as like if you're out in the West, like elk, or down in the Southeast, which is what we're going to be showing a demo from, white-tailed deer and turkey. And what we heard from a lot of landowners is that those were the things that they cared about most. Those were some of the driving reasons for why they owned the property. Oftentimes it was long-term value of the property or legacy. It was hunting opportunities for them and for their family, or it was to, they were seeking revenue-generating opportunities to help pay the cost of the land so that they could enjoy it and not go in the hole. And so working with NCX is really simple, and working with this tool is really simple. You can go to our website, ncx.com, and you can make an account in a couple of clicks. You can point out your property, and we're going to sort of behind the scenes run a deep analysis on a whole bunch of data, some that we've generated over the last decade, from our experience working with institutional forest landowners, those very sophisticated landowners. And yeah, so we're crunching the numbers and we're assessing what's on your property. We're looking not just as one monolithic forest, but different management units or ecological units that you have that might be different and that might benefit from different management styles. So we're crunching the numbers behind the scenes, and all that we ask that you tell us is what it is that you want to happen on your land. What do you value most? What is it you're trying to achieve? And so from the moment you get in, you're going to see this. What is your standing timber value? Most landowners don't know this, and it's actually usually pretty expensive to find out. We're leveraging remotely sensed information to give you a rough estimate. You could almost think of this as like a Redfin or Zillow Zestimate for your house. This is for your timber. So here it is. Here's one property in the US South. This person has $47,000 of standing timber value today. Their deer score, so we score that out of 10, is a 5.9, and their turkey is a 5.3, so about average. And so for this landowner, let's do something pretty typical. We'll say that they would like some revenue, and maybe they'd like to balance that with deer habitat. With this system as we have it right now, you can pick up to 2 of these combined, and it'll balance those. So you could have just as easily picked long-term revenue or timber revenue. So you want, you'd like to make some money now, maybe pay off the taxes or pay off a little bit of that initial cost of perhaps purchasing the land. But you also want to manage for that long-term legacy value. Or perhaps you're all in on wildlife and you want turkey and deer. But just for fun, we'll go with what we see a lot of folks choose, which is revenue and deer habitat. And luckily those often go hand in hand. And so we're going to click Show Me My Forecast. And behind the scenes, we're looking at thousands of scenarios, of different management scenarios that you could have run on all of the different management units we've identified on your property. And we're looking for the right combination that's going to provide, in this case, an increase in deer habitat over a 30-year time horizon and revenue that that you can make. And we use something called like net present value, or sort of the time adjusted revenue. So we're looking at, we know most people want revenue earlier on, but that has to be balanced with making sure you can kind of maximize what you get. So for this landowner, and we can see there what they have up top, we can see what goals they've selected. We see that if they manage in sort of the optimal way for these goals, there are a couple of things that happen. One is they can dramatically increase their deer habitat. See this gray line on the bottom, this baseline? That's what would happen if they just let their forest grow. Just for the next 30 years, they kind of stood back and said, I bet the best thing would be to grow this. It turns out it's not. It turns out that actually maybe active management is going to be better from a deer habitat standpoint. And we'll look at what those management recommendations are here in a second. But we also see that there's an awful lot of money to be made for this landowner if they take some actions now to prepare their forest, to grow it out further, and then sort of harvest later on and get quite a bit more revenue than what the current standing value of their timber is. What we see from this property is that it's a pretty young forest, and that by going in, and we have these recommended actions. These are what we like for this scenario, what the landowner would need to do over the next 5 years to achieve these outcomes, these things that they've said are most important to them. And what those are thinning. So it's not cutting all of the trees. It's going in and actually cutting out some of the trees that are choking out growth of your bigger, more valuable trees. It's making more growing space open for those trees, which simultaneously, in this case, opens up opens up the canopy and allows light to come down to the forest floor and for smaller plants to grow, which is what deer and turkey often eat. And that's why we see the deer habitat improving right off the bat with those thinnings. Now you see you're not making a whole lot of money with those early thinnings, but they cover their costs. So this landowner, by conducting a thinning, cutting just a few, some of those trees, they're making a little bit of money and they're dramatically increasing their deer habitat. And that's on a pretty large swath of their property, 292 acres.
Real quick, I want to double check on that because for a lot of landowners out there that what you just said there doesn't make a lot of intuitive sense, right? What you're saying is if you apply some management practices, then you can actually increase the health and the productivity of basically everything with their tree stand, versus what some might have the idea is like, I want this to be the best nature preserve. I want to see as much deer and turkey as I possibly want. I'm not going to touch it because nature can do better than I can. And the science of it, right? And that's where you know very well, that thought is not actually true, right? It actually coming in and thinning and you touch on this, is kind of acting the way that nature would if we would let it run its course of small brush fires coming through and things like that actually makes the forest healthier. Can you touch on that really quick?
No, you're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest surprises that we see from or that we hear from landowners when we review some of these results with them. Not every wildlife species benefits from more open forest conditions, but many of them do. And most of them benefit certainly from more complex forest conditions, meaning some openings, some more dense areas across, either an ownership or across your and your neighbor's ownership, because oftentimes they don't really respect the fence lines. But for these game species, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Trees themselves are sort of locked in competition. They're all fighting for resources, for water, for nutrients, and for light. And what thinning does, what some of these harvest operations do, is they kind of take out those, the poor competitors, the ones that are kind of choking things out, but not actually adding value, dollar value to your forest. And the way to think about it is whatever acreage you have, there's kind of a top limit on how much growth every year is happening on every acre. The question is, where is that growth going to go? Is it going to go to your big valuable trees, or is it going to lots of small trees? So growth is going to happen every year, but by thinning, in this case for this landowner, they're going to dramatically increase the rate of value accrual, the rate of sort of dollars that are stacking up in those trees on their property. And like you're saying, Craig, for these game species that benefit from more open conditions, you're improving that habitat. All of this would happen over a long period of time, but by doing this those trees would compete with each other. Some of them would die naturally, but by doing this, you're sort of accelerating that natural process, just like with a fire, or just like with, if some insects had come through and took out the weaker trees. And so that's what's happening. And that's what we want landowners to be able to see with this tool, to be able to say, this is what matters to me. Now, what is the best thing for me to do? And what I want you to know about this tool is it's not a super prescriptive description for the landowner. We're saying thin, right? For these lots of stands. But what we want you to do is if when you see this, you recognize, yes, I need to be active in my management to achieve my goals. Then at that point, that's when you want to talk with a professional that can really help dial this in and make sure that we're fully understanding the nuance of what it is that you're trying to achieve beyond just, 2 goals, and to connect you with a professional to get this done. Because what we've found is that landowners, like Max said, they look at their forest and it just feels like a wall of green. And they assume that either cutting everything today is going to make them the most money, or that just being hands-off is going to get them the wildlife outcomes that they want. And it's not usually that simple. And they struggle to get help. And they struggle to get very, very directed help. And so this is the easy button for you in your forest. You click this button, you're going to be talking with an expert who can help direct you and help sort of guide that process to help you make the right decision for your land and your goals, and then to actually execute that on the property. So that's why we're so excited to release this, to get this in front of folks. So let's see. I guess Max, anything?
One thing in here about the wall of green that I think is actually really nice about this tool that we've put together is you can see the baseline in that like deer habitat quality, right? That dotted gray line. That does not stay the same over the course. Even if you're not doing anything, right? That number changes over time. Your forest is not a static thing. Like Zach says, growth is happening on your forest every single year. And the impactful thing that you can do as a landowner is shape like, well, where does that growth happen? Is that in the, is that happening in big diameter stuff and small trees? Does that help me achieve more of the things that I want on my property? And we're hoping that a tool like this makes it easy for you to at least take some of those first steps, right? And understand directionally, like, oh, actually, maybe I do need to be doing more active management, or actually maybe just letting stuff grow is the way to achieve what I want on my property. But anyway, so this is like I said, a pretty fresh off the presses or hot off the presses release from NCX. We'll be building this tool out over time, but we really hope that this is a way for many landowners across the country to get started with more active forest management. Like Zach said, there's a button at the bottom there that you can click and talk to a forestry expert here at NCX, and we can make sure that you're sort of pointed in the right direction on all that, and help you find trusted local partners to actually do things like thinnings and timber harvests and management like that.